Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. You remember the piece by Publius Ducius Mus in 2016. Later, we found out that was Michael Anton writing in the Claremont Review of Books that 2016 was the Flight 93 election for conservatives. It was going to be the last stand for anything resembling cultural conservative values, really founding values being present in American culture. Jared Baker over at the Wall Street Journal has a fun piece that where he sort of channels Tom Wolfe from Radical Chic, talking about a party he attended just before Christmas with all the who's who of elites in New York City. He writes, there were titans of Wall Street, giants of the media, former political figures now earning an honest $1 million or $9 million at private equity firms. Men and women who answer to that oxymoronic description of public intellectuals, grand dames of the Manhattan salons whose accumulated Botox bills would pay down the public debt of one of the more dynamic emerging market countries.
Oh, ouch.
This is fantastic. It's really, I told you, he's channeling Radical Chic. He talked about how the mood was rather grim, even though the party was decorous. The elite, as he writes, leaning on each other for comfort because of populism, nationalism, Trump, and Boris. He writes, for the liberals who dominate the media, the academy, or our permanent government, and many of corporate America's C-suites, 2020 is shaping up to be their Flight 93 election. To listen to the Democrat candidates, if Mr. Trump is reelected in November, it will be the end. This is their last chance to avert the Gotterdammerung of a second Trump administration. Wonderful Wagner reference, too. I appreciate that. He continues to lampoon them, noting that it's an odd sort of populist revolution that they reject, insofar as not only has it left the paradigm in place, but it's actually enriched the guarantors of it. But the real issue, he concludes, is not the livelihoods or even their power that these elites risk losing. It's their relevance. In elevating voices other than theirs, voices ignored for decades in the national conversation, it will make them seem less relevant. That's something they really fear, their lack of relevance. Very insightful piece. For more on the topic, as well as a discussion of Iran, we're pleased to be joined again by Roger Kimball, editor of the new Criterion, contributor to amgreatness.com as well. Roger, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
What about what Jared Baker suggests that for leftist elites, and I repeat myself, 2020 is their Flight 93 election?
Yes, I think that that's correct, and they've been trying to storm the cockpit for the last 3 years, but to no avail. I suppose the limits of the analogy are that the plane is on course and it has not been hijacked by a nefarious mass murdering crew, but rather is the airplane has been retaken by the good guys. Not that the never Trumpers are necessarily bad guys. It's just that I think Jerry Baker got it exactly right, that they're terrified by the prospect of their permanent exile from the corridors of power. Let's face it, people like Bill Kristol had been wont to think of himself as a sort of power behind the throne, someone who's, it is true, his political prognostications had the perhaps unmatched virtue of being always wrong. I can't think of a single political prediction that he made that was correct. Everybody gets some of them wrong, but he got them all wrong, which is a kind of distinction. And his judgment, in retrospect, when we see his desire to put forward Evan McMullin or David French as a presidential candidate to stand against Trump, it seems sort of sad and risible now.
Yes.
But it's a kind of Wizard of Oz moment when we, where there's all of this Sturm und Drang, and where you look behind the curtain, and there are these little men and women, Jennifer Rubins and Bill Kristols and Max Boots, scurrying around, little homunculi, screaming, but to no avail. Nobody really pays them any attention, and the only reason that they have any audience at all is because of the left. The left is perfectly happy to give people like Max Boot a platform, because they can say, well, see, here's a conservative who is beating up on President Trump and his supporters. But of course, he's not a conservative. He's a kind of exiled erstwhile conservative.
Speaking of the politically promiscuous elites, Michael Bloomberg, he's spent his way into third place in some of the national polling. That doesn't necessarily mean he's registering in the early states. It's reminiscent of Rudy Giuliani's run for president. You actually have to win some caucuses and primaries, so we'll see what he can do at some point. But do you? It seems to me like he may be the white knight for this elite that Jared Baker writes about in the Journal, and I wonder if you think there's the possibility that he can buy his way to relevance in the race.
Well, possibility is cheap. I mean, anything, I suppose, is possible. Is it likely that Michael Bloomberg would be the candidate? No, I think it's vanishingly unlikely. Millions and hundreds of millions of dollars do buy you a certain amount of attention. They certainly will buy you the prostituted services of consultants who are eager to take your dollars. But Mike Bloomberg is not going to be the candidate. I suppose it's possible that he could be a third-party candidate, but then that would just assure the greater margin of President Trump's victory. It's a kind of, to me, it's a sort of little distraction. I don't think that he is. I don't think that it's going to happen.
Well, speaking of Democratic candidates, which Democratic candidate do you think has the best judgment on foreign policy? If there is one. Because you have
that's a tough one.
It's one of those.
Because they're showing their true colors right now with this, the killing of the Iranian leader, and I don't know if I like, from an assassination to, well, maybe it was justified to now we're starting World War III.
A related question, Roger. What's the tallest skyscraper in Wichita? Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's I don't know. That's a very hard question. Which of the Democratic candidates has the best judgment about foreign? I suppose you'd have to say Joe Biden, but
wow.
once you've said that, what have you said? It's pretty sad, isn't it?
The man who Bob Gates said has been wrong about every foreign policy decision he's ever made for 30 years. That's your best foot forward.
Mayor Pete served.
I suppose he is still the front runner in a way. I've said all along I didn't think he was going to be the candidate, and given his adventures and his son's adventures in Ukraine, China, and elsewhere, I think that's even more the case now that he will not be the candidate, but he might. He might. I think actually, things change by the day. At the moment, it looks to me like Bernie Sanders is sort of surging. I'm not quite sure whether the instinct for self-preservation has been entirely bred out of the Democratic Party, but if it has, then Bernie, a declared socialist, somebody who says he wants to put the executives of the fossil fuel industry in jail for what? For what crime? Well, for the crime of being politically incorrect, I guess. Mm-hmm. It's insane. It's conceivable that he could be the nominee, but it would be it would be good for President Trump. That's for sure.
Speaking of Comrade Bernie, he called the elimination of General Soleimani a political assassination, as did Warren, as has much of the left. It's reckless. Sure. It's a stick of dynamite in a tinderbox. It's World War III. We're going to reinstitute the draft. You wrote a piece at amgreatness.com about an antidote for the Iranian hysterics. What is that antidote?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to back up, Soleimani was a mass murderer. His elimination was a public service. It's in a way no different from what Ronald Reagan did when he bombed Libya. His intention was to kill Muammar Gaddafi. He bombed his house. Why? Because there had been a bombing in a discotheque in Berlin, in which several people were killed, scores injured. Among those killed were 2 Americans, and Ronald Reagan said this will not stand. And President Trump is not a hawk. He much prefers diplomacy to military action, and he in fact was criticized by many for not taking a stronger stance after the Iranians shot down a drone. But killing Americans is a red line in the sand for him, as he showed. Soleimani is responsible for the deaths of hundreds and hundreds of Americans and scores of thousands of Syrians. The idea that, as the Washington Post put it, that he was a revered figure is preposterous. The Iranians themselves, the people of Iran, who were subject to his to his methods, are celebrating his death, not the mullahs, but the protesters, the people who were protesting against the regime, against whom he brought the force of his police state. They were celebrating. So it's totally justified, and Iran is not in the position to institute World War III or even a game of cops and robbers.
And now we're subjected to the indignity, courtesy of the Beltway Big Government Press Corps, of taking the Potemkin funeral service for the general. We're supposed to take that just as Iran is presenting it, as a nation mourns kind of bull jive. It's really amazing to see Iranian propaganda amplified by American press.
Yeah, so you expect the Iranians to do that, and I expect the mullahs to jump up and down and scream death to America, as they've been doing for the last 30 years.
But the Iranian parliament was doing it.
Yeah, that's the playbook. I mean, what is disappointing is the fact that so much of the American media, the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, and on, that they should take up this chant as well. That is disappointing. I think this is going to be a little bit like the Israelis' bombing of the Iraqi nuclear plant. A lot of people criticized it at the time publicly, but privately they were very happy about it. One never knows, but I suspect this will blow over in a matter of days.
He is Roger Kimball. He's editor of the New Criterion, also contributor to American Greatness, amgreatness.com. Roger, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hold fast!
The best picture of the year is 1917, raves Forbes magazine.
We've got orders to cross here. That is the German front line.
It's a soaring tribute to heroism that's both epic and intimate.
We need to keep moving!
The best war movie since Saving Private Ryan.
There's only one way this ends. Last man standing.
1917. Rated R. Under 17.